So today we're going to talk about fake love versus real love. And I thought it was really appropriate considering that we're heading into Valentine's, which since I don't have anybody romance in my life, I've been sort of missing that point that this is the week of Valentine's. Not been top of my mind lately, but we're going to talk about how to differentiate real love from fake love. How does a narcissist pull us in and make us think that we're experiencing real love when actually it's just an imitation, a pretty cheap, often pretty bad imitation of real love. And a lot of victims come under criticism for that somehow we should recognize that we're dumb for falling for it, where we are, that we didn't set limits fast enough. But I really want to push back on that and talk about why that happens. So let's kind of outline where we're going to go today. We're going to first of all talk about why it appears like real love when we meet somebody who's a narcissist. Then we're going to hop into how come it works so effectively on us, and then what to do if you think you're in a relationship where love isn't real. How can you kind of test it and assess it? And then what steps should you take to protect yourself better, to sort of like do something around it? So I'm really thrilled that you're here with me today. I have been really sick. I'm still battling something. We don't really actually know fully what's going on with me, but so I'm taking it day by day, and I'm keeping it easy. I'm just doing the things that I can do, and hanging out with you all is one of my favorite things that I really, really like to do. So I just deeply appreciate the fact that you guys have been so supportive, and even though maybe some of the content's been a little slower in some places, thank you so much for your patience about that. I really appreciate that so much. So what does a narcissist do that makes us think that we're experiencing real love when really it's just fake love? First of all, they create a sense of history with us. And I actually got to hear Dr. Kristen Milstead, who wrote the book, Why Can't I Just Leave?, talk about this. When she said it was like an epiphany to me. So imagine that you meet somebody and they actually don't have a whole lot in common with you. You don't know that. You think that you do, because what happens is they begin to mimic, mirror, and parrot you. They start to pay attention to your history, and then they create connections in that history that may be actually really flimsy. Maybe if you were an ethical person, you wouldn't have based that as a connection. Like, for example, maybe you went to University of Chicago, and they might have visited Chicago and maybe even got close within walking distance of University of Chicago, but they'll act like they actually was in University of Chicago, like they went there or they spent a semester there. They'll do something that establishes a connection through something that's actually just a really loose association. So you start to feel like maybe they were there, and maybe they were there roughly around the time that you were there, and that you implant them in your memory. You start to think about what it was like to walk across the green and imagine them walking across the green. And you start to create this shared past. And one of the things that makes us feel very connected to people is having a shared past. So they create this sense that you have something that's similar. My ex talked about the age of his kids. Now, at the time when I met him, I was just thinking, wow, he's raised 2 boys. And the boys are roughly the same age as my kids. He knows what it's like to be around teenage boys, putting boys through school, dressing boys, handling boy relationships, maybe even breakups, or everything that goes related to boys. What I didn't know, because he didn't say at the time, was that he wasn't around for their lives. The one son he didn't even know until the kid was fully grown up. And the other child, he was in and out so often that and working so much that he was essentially an absent parent. And then once he left that relationship, he was permanently gone for this child's life for the most part. But it felt like when I heard that we shared this similar history, and I could see him living sort of the life that I lived, even though we actually had nothing in common. So the future faking creates a shared past. And then they start to, that the mimicking, parroting creates a shared past, but then they start future faking. So they start to dream about the future that you're going to create with them. They're going to create with you. They listen to you super closely, which is probably the only time they're going to listen to you in this relationship. but they listen to you super closely in that initial part of that relationship because they want to hook into the things that have emotional meaning to you. They're going to say, like, if you have this dream of going and watching the stars at night in a light pollution free area, they're going to talk about, oh, they should go to a certain state or a certain park or have a certain adventure. Now, they have no intention to put any effort behind that. There's no no plans to like develop these plans. It's just a way for you to feel like you have this past that they've mimicked and mirrored, and now they're creating this potential future of a connection that you're going to have to get you to dream about them and imagine sharing life with them, so that you have this sense of continuity of shared life. And then the other thing that they begin to do, and thank you so much guys for the gifts, I appreciate that, is that they also then at the same time, they they make this moment extra special, saying that you have a connection that they've never had with anyone before, that you're uniquely different than everybody else. And this is a form of idealization, and we don't actually recognize it at the time. Everyone, I want you to really hear me, everyone wants to experience idealization. We know we're imperfect. We know better than anybody else what's wrong with us. And to have the idea of someone who thinks that we are just amazing, perfect, the way that we are, is so intoxicating that we often miss that this isn't based on real life. This isn't based on who you actually are. It's not even based on a whole lot of information, because when you first meet this person, they know very little about you. They don't know what you're like in conflict. They don't know what you're like when you have a bad day, or there's a whole lot they don't know. I mean, what they know about you could fill literally just a one page of a piece of paper, if even that. But this sense of you being just special, unique, just a delight, really appeals to our need to be seen as worthy, and it deeply connects with us. But we need, if we could get better at recognizing idealization, recognizing that it's not based on any real information, not much information, then we can get better at realizing that whatever is being idealized will be devalued. If you're put up on a pedestal, you're going to be knocked out under that pedestal is going to be knocked out from underneath of you. So that's one of the reasons that we fall for this. We end up falling in love because we love to be loved and we love to feel this incredible connection. We also, when we get into these relationships, they start to feed us that whatever goes wrong is changeable. And most of us have been raised culturally to believe that things are workable. People are processes, and that if you just put enough sweat equity into it and enough determination, that we can pretty much do anything that we want to do. Which, for the most part, there is some truth to it, but there are people, based upon the way that they're hardwired, are not interested and not open and not even able to see that change is something they're interested in, because change requires a couple pieces that toxic individuals really struggle to have. One is the ability to tolerate imperfections in themselves. They really struggle with, for lots of reasons. You're going to have some people some theorists who will say it's because they have this intense superiority, and the superiority leads them to believe that it doesn't align with who they see themselves. It's whatever goes wrong isn't because of them, because of the superiority, it's because of the failed environment, because of your failures, because of life's failures, because of something that's happened around them. There's other people, though, who can't face their imperfection because of the shame. So you'll see people kind of like dancing back and forth between, oh, they're shame-based, versus other people saying, no, they have this superiority, that they see themselves above and different from everybody else. But in order to change, you have to accept that there's imperfection. And that then means that you then can look at it, address it, and do something about it. But when you can't see that there is imperfection, then there's nothing to change. Then the change has to fall elsewhere. And anybody who's been in a relationship with somebody who's like this knows that you end up feeling like you're the problem a lot. They make you the problem. They say that you're the problem. They'll disown that the problem is with them, and they'll always find a way to sort of defend, excuse, blame other things and other people for what goes wrong, but they're very quick to point out every way in which you're not perfect, making you feel very defective, like you're the issue in these relationships. So, but because we believe in change is so possible, we end up falling for this and thinking that when they feel the threat of loss, that we end up thinking, oh, but they're promising to change. They want us to work. They're invested in this. What we don't realize is we're really not hearing a person's investment in change. What we're hearing is protest behavior. This is somebody who doesn't want life to change until they're ready to make the change. They want you not to make any change. They don't want you to reject them. They don't want to take any ownership. They are really placing the blame outside of them, but they're focusing on they're giving you this illusion of change because they're really trying to actually manipulate you in you not making a change, like leaving. That's really the goal, is they don't want you to change. They don't want you to take action. So it's actually a form of manipulation. And whenever they start to feel like you're pulling away, like you just had it and you've had enough, and you start to like mentally check out or emotionally withdraw, they're very sensitive to that. And generally they do something to reactivate your hope that change is possible, hope that they actually are more invested than they seem to be based on their behavior. They do hope in their potential because you see kind of the sweet side of them that you fell in love with when you first met them, but they do something that reignites your hope, making you think that maybe things are not as bad as they are. Maybe things could take another turn for the better. The other reason we get fooled in thinking that their love is real when it's just faked is that they're very good at always being the victim. As I said already before, because they're not open to seeing themselves as a cause of problems and being able to own failure and make mistakes, they really reframe everything that happens to them as someone else doing something to them. It's their childhood, or it's the trauma, or it's too much stress, or you're pressuring too much. You're causing them to feel guilty, or work or life isn't working out quite right. There's always something out there that they place the blame on to avoid taking the blame for themselves, because they just cannot manage that. It just is something they're not willing to do. But because we are soft-hearted, we're compassionate, because we know that we also are flawed, this tends to work because we know that we're not perfect, so that we give them reasons to not be perfect. It feels really harsh. I mean, how many times have you tried to set a limit, and sometimes they'll do such a subtle thing that the limit settings feels like overkill, when it would have been just easier to say, sure, I'll give you another chance. But chances are that only leads to more heartbreak and more betrayal, because they don't actually change. They're actually just trying to punt the problem down the road. And the other thing that really causes us, and I kind of already mentioned it, is that we hold ourselves responsible. Because we're okay with being at fault and we see ourselves as flawed, then when they challenge us and make us the problem, we tend to consider ourselves as possibly part of the problem. How many times have you heard that it takes two to tango, or there's two sides to everything that happens? So when they suggest that maybe you're partly the responsible party, you are willing to consider it because you know that there are often two sides to things, and you know that you're imperfect. So it really makes you start to challenge your standards and challenge your doubt yourself, and possibly accept their bad behavior or their mistreatment of you. And the other thing is, and here's the truth, I know anybody who read my book, Love You More, challenged me when I was reading through the reviews, is that why did I put up with so much? Why did I put up with 2 years of massive level betrayals and lies? Well, because we all just want love. We don't like change. We hate loss. Because we did fall in love with somebody, then we really hope that love can be recaptured, that it's possible to come back again. And it's just hard to, even in the best of circumstances, it's hard to leave a relationship. Deeply, deeply difficult. So to leave these relationships when there's this back and forth, a little bit of hope with a lot of disappointment and frustration, a little bit of more hope, dash of hope, this reinforcing pattern of inconsistency is so addictive that it makes us like hang on and be afraid of giving up. I know that I remember thinking in the middle of all of that, what if about the time that I leave, he really gets his act together and everything makes a massive improvement and I miss out on that. I miss out on the improvement. I don't know how many times I said that to myself, that if I leave, he probably will get better and then I'm never going to experience the good side. And I can see such potential and I don't want to miss that good side. So really watch out for this. It's actually what I'm just describing to you is a form of cognitive dissonance, but watch out for that. Watch out for the way that that intermittent pattern of behavior, hot and cold behavior, fools you, tricks you, and lulls you into thinking that things could get better, and it really feeds into this fear of loss that you don't want to miss out on what their potential is. Here's the really painful truth of the situation, and that is a person who's truly bothered by the pain they're causing you doesn't promise to change, they change. I mean, think about for a moment. I think the way to kind of ground ourselves when we're in this situation is to use yourself or something or an example that you know is really powerful, that you know that if it were you or somebody you know with a lot of ethics and a lot of integrity, what would they do? So ask yourself that. So imagine a relationship where you see a lot of integrity, a lot of loyalty, and an amazing amount of love. And say in that relationship, the person who has all this integrity and love finds out they're harming somebody else. What would they do? I bet you they would be deeply disturbed. They probably would do a lot of hard internal work on themselves. They would then challenge themselves and work to be profoundly different. And they would do all of that without you ever saying a word, just because they love you so deeply that this matters. And they're going to go to that kind of effort. What we've gotten used to, and this made me very sad and I feel a little kind of sick with myself, is we've gotten used to people who say things that are meaningless. We've gotten used to people who just offer pipe dreams and not real commitment. Just it's superficial, shallowness is what it is. And I'm stuttering to find the fact that we don't realize that we are worth so much more. You are worth so much more. You're worth someone's all, someone really giving a lot of effort into this relationship, not someone who hurts you repeatedly over and over and then end up, telling they're going to make a big difference, only then get irritable when you challenge them on the lack of difference. So really consider maybe reevaluating the standards that you're accepting in relationship. I've taken a long pause on that with myself, realizing that that basically what I've accepted is about 1 inch off the floor, and that I should expect people a whole lot more than just simply 1 inch of a commitment, 1 inch of compassion from somebody. That I really deserve someone's whole heart, someone as deeply invested in me and as deeply as cares about my well-being as I care about theirs. So make sure that there's a reciprocity in this relationship. Really, really make sure. So what happens? Let's move into the second part of what happens when we live in a relationship where there's been a consistent diet of fake love. What does that do to us? Because here's the part that's really concerning. Our sense of self is open to change. Who you surround yourself impacts how you feel about yourself. Think about that. That this increment, it's like a sort of this dripping, this water torture of dripping on you. A drip of water, if done for years on a certain spot, will reshape rock. And in the same way, this exposure to criticism and blaming and finger pointing, gaslighting, and all of this stuff that happens, lies, deception, running you down, passive aggressive behavior is the dripping that then changes you over time. It's a constant diet will begin to affect how you feel about yourself. It's almost like, to me, the way I envision it, it's like they throw shotgun of barbs at you. And they, over time, these barbs begin to work their way in and begin to shape how you see and feel about yourself. Because when someone says something repeatedly about you, here's one of the things that my ex was trying to feed me. I didn't buy it because I only was with him 2 years, and it never was applied to me in my life. So I thought it was like a bunch of hooey. I just didn't like whatever. But if he had targeted an area where I was tender and did the same thing, it would have had way more of effect. But one of the things he wanted to say was that I was an extreme packer when it came to traveling, that I had to basically pack my closet wherever I went. Now, that's hilarious. If you guys watch me pack, yeah, I take a lot of electronics, but usually because I'm the tech person carrying the electronics for the family. But outside of that, I mean, I don't take an extraordinary amount of shoes, and I don't take an extraordinary amount of clothes. But he had this need to always kind of just pick at me. Sometimes he'd make it a joke, and then sometimes it'd be a backhanded slap that he'd make at me. But sometimes it was a passive aggressive, like, comment about how heavy luggage was. But he was working on me. And over time, if I had lived with him for a very long time, this would begin to make me question myself. Well, maybe I do pack too much. I would start to look at other people and compare myself. Am I taking more than they take? I might even start to assess what should I take and not take. But do you see how over time these repetitive gaslighting, subtle criticisms, passive aggressive jabs, backhanded sarcasm, all of this begins to really work on our sense of self-esteem and creates self-doubt, which over time will lower our sense of self-worth. It also will begin to make you feel like you don't for sure know who you are. It will actually start to have an impact on your identity and cause sort of this fragmentation of confusion about you see yourself as good, but then they sometimes see you as bad. Are you really good or are you really bad? Which is true. Because they can't, toxic people don't hold people in congruence. They don't hold all your parts of yourself in at the same time. Because think about it. You're a mix of everything. You have good moments and bad moments. There's things that upset you and things that you really come through just amazing with flying colors. You're highly complex, but toxic people see things black and white, right or wrong, up or down, good or bad, and they also fragment you. Sometimes that idealization is when they see you as all good. And suddenly, exactly, Amanda, it's a fantasy. They paint you like a fantasy, that you're perfect, that life is perfect and everything's grand, and it's just sort of like this weird glowy thing. It's not a consistent whole integrated picture. And then when you tick them off or upset them, you're completely bad, that you never do anything right, that you're suddenly the biggest fool in the room, the biggest idiot. That because you're fluctuating between good and bad, and right and wrong, up and down, it ends up making you feel fragmented inside. You also then begin to experience yourself as both good and bad. You start to have this sense of yourself that way, the way that they see them. And that makes you feel kind of ambivalent and confused about who you are and what you think of yourself, if you're okay, because of this fragmentation that's happening. And obviously, this is going to cause you to emotionally numb and detach, because it is so painful to be in these relationships. Because your choice is between two extremes. When someone is doing this good, bad thing, right, wrong thing with you, you either will become highly defensive and reactive, which makes you feel crazy and bad, or you're going to just shut down, numb out, and just try to keep the peace. And what you do is you check out of yourself, you check out of your feelings, you just literally try to just survive so that you can get through it and not make things worse with them. This can get to be such a problem that you can get to a place where you don't even know how you feel. I'm not surprised in fact, I struggled to know how I feel. Sometimes it would take me days. A big event would happen, and I would know that I was upset. That's probably the only word I could say is I'm upset, but I wouldn't know how I felt. That was I angry? Was I broken? Was I grieving? Was I I don't know. I didn't know how. It took me a long, and what did I want out of it? What did I want to see happen and change? It took me a long time to sort of sit on that feeling. So when we're in these relationships for a period of time, we can get to the place where we lose touch with ourselves. We lose touch with our feelings, and it gets really hard to even know what you're feeling and how you're feeling. The other thing is that you get into a place where you're constantly scanning for safety and scanning to see how people are reacting, because you've learned that you can't just be yourself and show up. There's all this sort of evaluation that's happening. So in order to make things go better and not to be attacked, you start to scan people's reactions. You start to really read the room to try to anticipate problems before they become a problem. And that then makes you feel exhausted. I mean, you're all the time trying to like take care of other people's feelings, and you're not getting to sort of enjoy the moment. You're not getting to just be with yourself and be in your existence. It's hard. I'll tell you, because of how long I've had to do that, because this was something that was occurred in my own family as well. We'd listen for the back door, and my dad would walk into the house to see how heavy his steps were. And that would tell us if we needed to jump up and look like we're busy or not, or if we could sort of, if maybe homework was done and we were lounging and watching TV, but if he'd been working hard and those steps were heavy, boy, everybody better look busy when he came into the door, or he'd put you to work. I mean, he'd be enraged and put you to work. When you have a whole lot of exposure to this kind of experience like that or something similar, and then you end up in these relationships, it's really hard not to be like, take the holidays, guys. How many of you were at the family holiday party and you were assessing how well everybody was doing? You didn't get to sit there and enjoy the experience. You were busy making sure that, Aunt so-and-so wasn't feeling ostracized because she doesn't know everybody and she's a little strange. And then grandpa over here is really fussy with food, and you want to make sure he has just all the right things that he needs so he doesn't start to stir up a storm at the get together at the dinner. You're busy kind of taking the temperature of everybody so that you can avoid the conflict and avoid bad reactions and things going south. And it really gets exhausting when that happens. And unfortunately, when you're in a relationship like this, it damages your trust. It damages your trust with yourself, because you think, how in the world did I get in a relationship with somebody like this? What's wrong with me? It damages your trust in humanity, because you thought you picked a good person and you found out that you didn't. And it damages your trust in this person. You end up not knowing what's real, what you can believe and what you can't believe, which then causes a lot of isolation and loneliness. Now, granted, they're also isolating you, but this distrust increases the isolation, because now you feel you're isolated yourself because of your inability to know who you can rely on and who you can't. Leaving is super hard in these relationships. It is super hard because they keep us on a line. They keep us confused with the mixed messages, which makes it really difficult to know what's true and what's real. And here's the painful part. And I heard it from Lisa Sonni, Stronger Than Before. And then I've also read it in multiple other places, but she said it first to me, and I really deeply appreciate that. And that is, the love, the good part, that was unfortunately manipulation. It isn't with real relationships, but it is in these relationships, because it wasn't a real relationship from the beginning. Because of these people's brokenness, they collect people. They don't really have a relationship. They collect people. They're looking for you to feed into them and prop them up and stabilize them. They're looking for you to affirm them and validate them. They're looking for novelty and excitement. They're looking for things to sort of take advantage of when they meet you. So they shape themselves to be who you want, so that you fall for them so they can get what they need. So it wasn't really love. It was actually a form of massive manipulation, because it was a form of they're a consumer. These people are not people who relate. They're people who consume. And you were a consumable when they met you, unfortunately. You were a consumable. And so, but because of they keep you all this confusion, they're very, very effective at managing relationships to keep you invested, that you end up really, really struggling to leave. And it's super hard. I know that I agonized over that, just really agonized. So let's talk about for the next few minutes how to heal from being in a faked love relationship, how to be able to really heal from this. And I also then we're going to save the last 15 minutes for your questions. I know a lot of you have been asking questions that I've not been addressing, so I want to circle back and make sure we answer your questions. So if you've asked something and you haven't, I haven't acted like I've seen it. I may not, probably haven't seen it, but I also, right now, I'm focusing on this and I want to circle back. So, what are the practical steps to begin to heal from these relationships? I want you first to start rebuilding, working on your self trust. I want you to start working on your self trust. Start to make small, low risk decisions daily about your life. Maybe it's about what you're going to eat. Maybe it is what you're wearing or what you want to watch. And that may mean that you may have to, if you're still in a relationship with this individual, it may mean that you'll have to do some of these things alone because they control those things. There's a lot of coercive control around your life about, I know there was in my life. I didn't get to control the TV. Are you kidding me? No, he controlled the TV. I wasn't watching what he wanted to watch. Now, sometimes we would negotiate about a movie, but he would usually, make sure it was what he wanted, the way he wanted. But even the way what we ate, I rarely had a meal that I wanted. Most often was the meal he wanted or the place where he wanted to stop. And I was also suggesting it too to keep him happy. So, a lot of this was kind of happening around it. But consider starting to make small, low risk daily decisions. And then when you make those decisions, I want you to note that you did that. Really note, savor it. Savor your care for yourself. Savor how it goes, So focus on the success and experience of taking these risks and watching what happens. Maybe some of you, for the first time, have posted a video, shared content. Watch what happens when you do that, how people react getting to know you. Even if it's only 10 people who watch the video, just have a chance to take a chance and see where it goes. Or maybe it's reaching out to an old friend that you haven't talked to for a while and then paying attention to how it feels to do something like that. Or it might be someone just mentions turning on the music the way you want in the car when you're alone. But begin to sort of take back your life for yourself. Step number two. So first is rebuild self-trust through small decisions. Step number 2, I want you to stop explaining yourself. Stop explaining yourself. Gaslighting gets us into a bad habit of feeling like we have to tell everything under the sun to justify our decisions and why it was made that way. If you find yourself handing someone practically a manual about why you did what you did, the way you did it, stop. This is a good sign that you've been in a relationship with somebody who's been gaslighting you, criticizing you, making you doubt yourself, and you've gotten in a habit to try to reduce the conflict, reduce the criticism, although it probably doesn't really work, is to over-explain. I used to write him letters, long letters of explanation, kind of justifying about why I did what I did and why I said what I said and why I was so upset with what he said. Stop. First of all, this person's not listening. They actually don't care. It doesn't protect you better. It's not going to create a better boundary between you and them. It's not going to make them feel tender towards you. That's what I was hoping, that he would feel tender towards me. It actually doesn't do anything other than leaves you more vulnerable than you were before. You don't need to justify your needs, your feelings, your boundaries. So begin to sort of stop. And I'll tell you, this was an amazing step for me. When I began to really stop over-explaining and just simply saying things are what they are and end of story, it was like I was showing myself respect. That I actually said, I don't owe you anything. I don't owe you a big explanation. My no, or whatever it is enough. And it was so amazing when I did that. I was shocked at how affirming it was to me. So I want you to really think about just not over-explaining things because you don't need to. And you inadvertently, when you do it, are putting yourself in a one-down position, whether you know it or not. So first is rebuild self-trust through small decisions. Second is stop explaining yourself. Number 3, connect to your interests. I'll tell you guys, you'd probably be amazed because I know I don't talk about it, that I got into spinning wool. I owned 2 spinning wheels. One actually looked like from Snow White story. And I learned how to spin yarn, and I got so good at it that I was hired by one of the national makers of sweater and like knitting patterns and sweaters. I became part of her team that created one of her homespun yarns, line of yarns for a while. I loved doing it. I loved the dyeing and all of that stuff. I also took up violin for a while. I played violin. In fact, I practiced every single day for many, many years. I took it for 7 years and got good enough that I could have gone for a small community orchestra if I wanted to. Do you know that when I met him, I sold all my spinning wheels and I sold my violin? And all the things that I did, I was also writing every day on Quora since my first husband passed away, that I was named top writer in 2018, and I stopped writing on Quora. I stopped doing the things that just gave me so much passion when I met him. I want you to think about, what have you given up in your life? What were you like before, and what are you like now? And I want you to start to think about reintroducing one of these older things, these former interests, or maybe it's something you want to check out that's new. Now, I know that we change and grow, and our interests change and grows with us. So I'm not saying go back to what you used to be, but consider rediscovering who you are and what interests you, what you want to learn. What I learned as I reconnected with myself after this toxic relationship, that as I'm a very creative person, that what gives me joy in life and really gives purpose for me is always having a new project. And one of the ways I do that now is I love to create curriculums, and I love to think about how to increase experience for you and how to make things better. So now I'm throwing a lot of that creativity into spending time with you on social media. But think about how you can bring that back into your life. So reconnect with your authentic interests is point number 3. Point number 4, I want you to identify and challenge lies that you're hearing. Really start to challenge them. If your partner is telling you that you're the problem, challenge that. Have you thought about how to actually analyze whether or not you truly are the problem? This is how I would do it. I would say, what's a sign that somebody's a problem? I'd be that elemental. I would be just sort of like, go back. As if this was a problem, like an elementary algebra problem, that I'm going to write down the proofs. Okay, what's the sign that someone is a problem? All right, well, they stir up a lot of drama. Okay, where in your life are you creating drama? Are you the source of problems at work? Are you the source of problems in the neighborhood? Are you causing problems at every community meeting? Are you, literally, I would list through the whole thing. I would go through all the possible ways that would show that you're the problem. And then ask yourself, now, before I met this person, did I hear this before? Chances are most of us have not. Now, I'm not saying there's not some of us who have issues in some areas. Maybe we have a hot head and people say we're hot-headed. Yeah, and you're hearing it from multiple sources and multiple settings. That's something I probably would slow down and pay some attention to. But chances are this has been a creation as a way to project blame from the narcissist onto you. They're not the problem, you're the problem. So I want you to really begin to identify that. Maybe you hear you're too sensitive. Challenge that. Are you really too sensitive? What's a sign of a sensitive person? It's somebody who's like aware of the temperature of the room, and they have to have food in just a certain way. And now some of us may struggle with OCD, but usually that's around one thing. It's not around everything. But chances are this person has painted you with such a broad brush that they've made you the problem, not themselves. So I want you to ask yourself, is this actually true? And then find real live examples to disprove this. And I want you then to replace this with a new belief, like, I am sensitive in some stuff, and that's strength of mine, because then that makes me be able to really show care and concern and compassionate for people. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. So I want you to identify and challenge the lies. Here's another thing that I found that was super helpful. If you have a situation, this creates massive confusion, like, what happened? I don't know what happened here. All I know, it feels really crappy and I don't like it. Something went wrong here. What I found that really broke this apart was writing it down like you're writing a play, like scene by scene. This person did this, then they said that, then they did this. This is what I did. This is what I said. And then when you get done writing it down, start to think about what doesn't make sense, what's not adding up. And often when you get it on paper, you can see what's not adding up. You can see, because usually there's a lie. There's your what you're feeling, that odd sensation is your gut instinct warning you that something is not correct. The way that you can see it is by seeing it in black and white on paper in front of you. It's just really amazing that it starts to get clearer, because then you can see, oh, people don't do that. They only do that when this is happening. Like, I'm trying to think of it. There was something that I just knew wasn't something happened just recently where somebody said something. They claimed that they were making travel plans and they claimed the flights were too expensive. And I'm thinking, and then they even rattled a number off, and I thought, there's no way I saw flights this high. And I knew that actually they were trying to distract me from the fact that they wanted to say no. They just didn't know how to say no, so they were making this excuse of the flights were too high. It was when I started to think about, are the flights too high? Where are they coming from? Are they like coming from the other side of the world, or are they just coming from the other side of the United States? So when I started to like really look at it, then I could say, oh, they're throwing me off. This is actually, they don't want to come. They don't know how to say no. So they're using this as a way to sort of just deflect from that. So pay attention to that. So here, let me review what we've said. I want you to start rebuilding self-trust through small decisions. Stop explaining yourself. Reconnect to your authentic interests. And I want you to challenge the lies you've been told. Now, the next thing is, I want you to start to ground yourself, because what happens in these relationships is that when they start to really wind up, we get dysregulated. We become very upset, especially when they're lying about us or deflecting or attacking us. We want to like defend ourselves. Don't defend yourself. Just like don't explain, also don't defend yourself. Instead, I want you to find a way to soothe yourself. This is probably the hardest one of these that I'm suggesting. I know this for me, this is extremely painful. I mean, I literally, everything inside of me, and I would feel that like flush and that rush and that burst of words that I wanted to say. So it was really hard, very hard not to do this. But when you feel this, I want you to meet yourself. I want you to pause and say, I'm here with me. I know the truth. I want you just to reaffirm, I'm here with me and I know the truth. And then I want you to breathe. I want you to imagine hugging yourself and breathing. This person doesn't care let me give you a few hard truths. This person doesn't care what the truth is. They just care that they get you off their back. They don't care that they're hurting you and that they're painting you with very wrong colors and in very nasty ways. They just need to be right, and they need to avoid responsibility. So recognizing that whatever you say is just like pointing all this great effort into a direction that's not going to be useful and may make worse, I want you instead focus on yourself. Really focus on showing up for yourself. There are some things that you can do. One of them we talk a lot about is deep breathing, using diaphragmatic deep breathing, but you can also use grounding techniques like starting to notice things around you, tuning into your senses, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. You can also just sort of talk yourself through this, retell yourself the truth. So number 5 is I want you to really use grounding techniques instead of reacting. Number 6 is I want you to start thinking about what love really actually is. Really begin to redefine love. Don't base it on this experience. I want you to consider what you know based on your experience of loving people or wherever you've seen love modeled. What does it actually look like? Love makes you feel safe. Love gives you space. Love celebrates you as you are. Love makes you more. Love appreciates you for who you are. Love doesn't make you feel numb. Love doesn't make you feel extra careful. Love doesn't act impatient with you. Love doesn't shut you down. Really start to think about your definition of love and what you're receiving in the relationship. Now, some of you may say, but Kerry, that feels too idealistic. I just don't even know if that kind of love exists. I want to tell you that it does. Not a lot and not everywhere with everyone. And I can't even promise that you'll have another relationship with somebody in a romantic way that's like this. but you can have it with yourself, and you can begin to really vet those who are in your life to make sure that they deserve a spot at the table with you. It is hard. I know this part's hard. I had to learn how to have a relationship with myself, to not just have with myself. It was more than that. I had to develop a relationship with myself so that I know I always have my own back. And believe it or not, I didn't have one with myself before I got out of that relationship. So that's something that I really had to change. You can learn to do this too. And based on that, as you do that work, then that begins to set the minimum for what you're going to expect in future relationships. And I want you to think about that with everybody, whether it's a colleague, it's a friend, or even whether or not how close you get into it with close you get with neighbors. Certainly relationships that are like romantic relationships. And I even think it's important to consider when it comes to family relationships. Start to think about what non-negotiables you're going to set for these relationships. Maybe it is you're not going to tolerate gaslighting. Maybe it is that when there's someone's first lie that pops up, you're out. Maybe it is when someone who doesn't respect a boundary that you set, that you're done. And I want you to remind that these boundaries are not to push people away, but to free up space to allow the right people into your life. Really, let me say that again. It's not to push people away. It's to free up the space so that the right people can come into your life. Number 8 is I want you then to surround yourself intentionally with the people who really help you and let you be you. And I want you to, number 9, make your contentment to be something that's important. And of course, then number 10, I want you to celebrate every step of progress that you make. Healing, you're not going to arrive. There is no arrival in this process. It's only just constantly a destination. You're always heading towards a destination of constant wins and being more authentic and being able to be more safely yourself. So don't see this as a pass fail, because there really is no such thing. And you're going to have bad days as well as good days. So just sort of like realize that this is sort of, it's messy. And that's part of the process. It's just really messy. So if those are ways for you to heal out of fake love, I have found, so this is my parting wrap-up thought about this. As I do these things, I am naturally less tolerant of bad behavior. And I'm not even harsh about it. I'm very kind to people. I naturally weed people out of my life that I find that just don't make me feel safe and free to be myself. So these ways of healing actually will reduce the people in your life who tend to be toxic. They'll just reduce the number of them. But I want to give you a warning. Some of you will end up thinking, well, but I find that there's not a lot of people. Well, that's because there's not a lot of healthy people. So be aware that you may have fewer relationships, but they're going to be more freeing, more lovely. You have a lot more contentment in your life, but it may not be as busy as you were before. But it will sure be a lot less drama and a lot less pain, which are all really, really good things. Okay, so now I'm going to take your questions. Feel free to ask whatever you want about anything you want. It doesn't have to be about this topic. I really hope that this week of Valentine's, that you do have a great week and that it's, meaningful and special. But so what is it that you would like to talk to me about today? So Fuel Up on YouTube said, we have a 2-year-old, his only son, and he wants nothing to do with him. And he said, it's only about me and it's never been his son. Wow. That's sad. I feel sad for your son. I feel sad for you. I do think there's a silver lining in that dilemma besides the grief. And the silver lining is that means there's going to be less conflict potentially, hopefully, by him emotionally abandoning your child. But I do feel really sad for you. I think what I would recommend is you create space for your grief, that it's going to be painful and hurt, but know that your child has you. I'm widowed, so my son's father passed away. They don't have a father either. And I wish that I could have that for them, but I know that I can't replace it, and I know that I can't make that happen. But I do know that I have to trust the universe or God or something bigger than myself to know what my child needs and to provide those people and examples in their lives. You're asking a follow-up question. How can one actually make you believe that you are them? I don't know how, I don't quite know how I can't see the connection with that question with the second one. So I apologize that I don't really see that. But yeah, if you want to say more, I'd be happy to read it and try to like connect the dots. Okay, on TikTok, Coco said, is there any way to stop? By the way, Coco, I see you're a member, a subscriber here. Thank you so much for that. Is there any other way to stop the rumination as I heal? Yeah, rumination is it's a bear. It really is a bear. What works best is to catch it when it happens, speak the truth to yourself, use a distracting thought, and deep breathe through it. That's really the best way to, over time, it will help you to reduce the rumination. You're entertaining the rumination. There's where you get trapped. You keep thinking it's solvable and it's not solvable. The more you entertain that rumination, the more it becomes powerful and big and captivating. So the way to reduce it is to actually speak the truth into it and then move away to a different topic or a different thought. Don't feed it, don't fuel it by spending more time on it because you increase the size of it. Can a narcissist ever change? If they have narcissistic personality disorder, and this question came in on Instagram, no. If they're full blown NPD, then no, they're not going to change. This is the way that they're hardwired psychologically, and it's because of the defensiveness of their structure, it is the way that they are. But unfortunately, they lead us to believe change is possible. But watch their behavior. Does their behavior confirm real change? And again, just like what I said when I challenge you to write down what real love looks like, ask yourself, what does changed behavior look like? I think it really helps a lot for us to compare. If you did something terrible, say you did it sort of a tragedy, something like catastrophically, painfully hurtful, what would be the steps that you would take to help that person heal from what happened? And then ask yourself, is this person doing that similar type of work as you would do if this was you? And that will really help you to understand the difference, whether or not they're changing or not changing. Will a narcissistic friend impact somebody if they stay as roommates in one house? Yeah, unfortunately, narcissist has an impact, so they're going to impact you if they're in a house because they're going to cause problems. Maybe in the beginning it will be, remember there's a honeymoon period usually at the beginning. So you're going to experience that where things seem to go well, but before you know it, you're going to start to they're going to break your boundaries, eat the food that's your food when you ask them not to, and then claim they don't remember, or they're going to, you can't bring up anything that they do. They'll be rude. They'll do things like come in too late and be loud. They won't think about what it is that you need. They're not, because they don't see you as a real person. They just see what they need and what they want. So they're going to sort of be callous. That's how I would expect it to experience. Mariel asked on YouTube, is CPTSD, I always did I say that right? In the DSM-5. To my knowledge, it is not. It is something that's been written about and theorized as something that's real, but I don't think it's made its way into the DSM-5, which would be TR. But I'd have to Google that because I'm not current anymore. My last DSM that I had to work off, it was the DSM-4 TR. So even the 5 is not something I'm super familiar with the way that I was when I was working with the 3, 4, and 4 TR. But I don't think it's in the 5 TR, which is problematic. It should be, but I think it is problematic. Is there a test, this is Kate Basket is asking on TikTok, that we can give somebody to find out if they're a narcissist? I think the best thing to watch out for, Kate, I'm sorry, I don't actually know your K. It's K. Why am I acting like it's Kate? I don't know. So I think the best thing is to watch for their behavior. Do you feel less than? Are you feeling confined? In the beginning, they're actually going to make you feel extra special, like you're perfect. But you'll notice small ways in which if you set a boundary, they're not going to react very well. They'll do some kind of pushing of it, or they'll minimize it, or they'll ask if they really need to do that. But in the beginning, it's kind of this rosy period. So it's hard to spot it in the beginning. But wait until there's a conflict, and also wait for passive aggressive behavior. There's a woman online that I really love this. She has what she calls the dud test. Have you heard of that? Where she actually plants plants an idea that something is more emotionally impactful than it is. Like, I'm going to make one up. Like, say of one of my nicknames when I was a kid was Skeeter. My dad called me Skeeter because I was like a mosquito. I buzz bombed around, he'd say. I thought it was cute. It didn't bother me that he called me that. But if I wanted to plant a dud, I would say my dad used to call me Skeeter, and it really bothered me. I mean, it really bothered me a lot. I mean, I was so angry every time he said that. See, there's the dud. It's not real, it's a dud. Yeah, it's true. He actually called me that, but it didn't bother me. I then watch what happens. Toxic people can't resist giving you a jab. They'll make like a backhanded joke at your expense. They'll tell somebody, or maybe they'll bring it up in public that happened, but they'll do something that tells you that they were listening and that they actually have feelings of contempt about you, so that they'll then turn around and they'll use it against you, and it'll be harmful, so yeah, pay attention to that. But you may even have a dud that you may not even know that you got planted. Here's one of mine, and it hurt, but it didn't really hurt. I mean, I shared, so one of the things that's true about me is that I spill food on my clothing, and as a result I've gotten really good at laundry because I've had to get stains out of my clothes. So I shared that had been a part of my history. And it been, as a kid, I didn't like it. It was hurtful. And, but it doesn't always happen as an adult. I've figured ways out not to do it as an adult. What happened in that relationship, though, is one day he came through and he'd spilt ketchup on his front of his shirt, which, by the way, ketchup is a disaster. That's one of the things you can't get out very well. And he said, "Oh, I got to watch out. I'm going to become just like you." See, he knew that was a sensitive thing. And that, because I told him how much it affected me as a kid. Now, he didn't know it wasn't sensitive now. I don't really frankly care. But he just remembered that it was sensitive because of the kid. And then he used it against me to get me back. There you go. When you see that, that's an act of sadism. You guys know what sadism is? I mean, you may have heard of it, but do you really know what sadism is? Sadism, sadism happens more often in relationships than we think that it does. Sadism is when someone takes pleasure in your pain, and he was enjoying my discomfort. And so when you see that, you don't want to be in a relationship with someone who's sadistic, very, very much, because of that. So pay attention to stuff like this, where you've shared something personal, deep, something vulnerable. Watch what they do with that. Watch how it comes back to you. And if it comes back to you because they've gossiped, now you know you got someone who's a gossiper. But if it comes back as a jab to you, know somebody doesn't really authentically love you and accept you the way they are. This is a person who's sitting there and holding things against you. Yes, Kent Patrick said on YouTube, that smirk, that funny smirk that you're seeing in conversations, that is a sign of contempt, which is a sign of disgust. That's the opposite of respect. It's disrespect. So if you sense that somebody is sort of patronizing, impatient, huffing and puffing, sighing, they're smirking, they're making light of your stuff, that's an early sign of deep problems. Relationships where there's continuous pattern of contempt rarely make it. And if you'd like to know more about this, check out John and Julie Gottman's work on the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The 4 horsemen are contempt, it is defensiveness, criticism, and stonewalling. You get all 4 of those, your relationship is highly likely not to make it, extremely likely. I'm going to take one more question before I wrap up. I'm right now scanning all these people who have written stuff. Fuel Up asked, how does a narcissist consume you so much when you start saying the words that they use and you would never use that? Oh, how do they take up so much of your mental space? Yeah, they do. They get into our heads to where we innately know we're not safe with these individuals. So we start to kind of like fit ourselves into their boxes and use words they would use and use their language. By the way, you can find out a whole lot about this in the book, How He Gets Into Her Head by Don Hennessy. Don Hennessy wrote a book called How He Gets Into Her Head. He says, in fact, predatory people know that you are being successfully groomed when you start to use their language, because then you're starting to see and frame things the way that they see and frame things. Yeah, it's very, very toxic when they start to do that. Oh, Nikki was saying that smirk wasn't a smirk. Her counselor said it was a nervous smile. Yeah, but you know what, Nikki? I suspect that your gut told you that it was not as kind as he claimed that it was. So we need to really learn to listen to our gut. That's so, so important, is to pay attention to that. If it bothered you, it bothers you. And here's the other thing. Like, consider this. Back to, remember, one of the things we talked about healing from fake love is challenging the gaslighting and the disbelief. That's a kind of a gaslighting statement. This is how I challenge it. I would say, if I cared about someone and they told me I was doing something that bothered them, would I justify it or would I stop? I would stop. I wouldn't push back. I would stop. So the fact that your counselor just defended why he did what he did instead of being concerned about that it bothered you, to me says this is not a person who's in your corner. Not at all. All right, guys, next week I will not be live. I will be not live until March. So watch for my next live. It will be March, I think 3rd or 4th. I'm trying to think of what day in the calendar it is. It will be, because I'm going to be out of town, but I'm going to miss you guys. It'll be March 4th. So my next live will be March 4th. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. I thank you for your well wishes. I'm really working to get better and feeling better. But I deeply appreciate just you being in my audience. It just means so much to me. You have no idea how I feel like I get to know you guys and how much you guys all mean to me. So thank you very, very much. But I'll be back with you March 4th. All right, you guys, take care. Bye-bye.